And welcome everybody to the HOU.SEC cast, the HOU.SEC.CON podcast. Sam and I get to talk to Trey Ford today. That's pretty cool, huh?
That's really awesome. Who doesn't know Trey Ford? Really appreciate him taking the time for us today, for us two little minions here. So excited to have that conversation.
Trey would be very embarrassed if he hears us say that. So when he gets this full episode, he will be very embarrassed. He's a humble guy, but a truly smart guy. He's over at Bugcrowd now, doing some CISO work over there. He's done a lot of good work for the industry, for the community, everything else. So really honored to have him on here. So let's not waste any more time on this introduction, and let's jump over and talk to Trey.
Let's go.
Sam, we are back, and we have a pretty cool guest, a good friend, guys we've known for a while, fellow Texan. Really happy to have Trey Ford on. How you doing, Trey?
Thanks for having me on. I'm doing well.
Good. So Trey is the pretty new CISO at Bugcrowd, correct?
Correct. I came on as CISO Americas. Our global CISO sits out of Perth, Australia. Majority of our security organizations based there, helping lead the FedRAMP charge. There's a number of things that I'm running for the US and for EMEA, but just came on.
Very cool. Well, congratulations on the new gig.
Thank you. Got a long history with Bugcrowd. I met Casey in 2012 when he first came over for seed round raising, and been an advisor a little over 10 years. I got the LinkedIn, congratulations on your 11th anniversary at Bugcrowd. I'm like, well, this is just awkward timing, but yeah, longtime fan and excited to be on full time.
Awesome. Well, good stuff. Well, we're going to talk about you here in a little bit. Now let's jump into the news segment itself. So we've got an article here that I think kind of aligned with your talk, Trey, a little bit, that we'll be talking about here in a little bit, but all about, and this is kind of the, I don't know if you want to call it the real, but the new sexy in cybersecurity, which is cyber resilience. It's talking about being, resilient versus just being secure, being able to recover from things a little bit quicker, not, I don't know if you would call it a complete assume breach type of discussion or kind of point, but it kind of is in that way. The article talks about key strategies to enhance cyber resilience, and what they specifically brought up, which everybody is still talking about, which is understandable, is the CrowdStrike software update. And that really focused a lot of people on the whole resilience, not just in cyber resilience, but being able to recover from IT outages in general. And that was just kind of a global scale incident, and everybody was really caused them to focus on it. And I know even internally in my day job, we had a lot of conversations about what do we need to be talking about from a cyber resilience standpoint. I know when I do workshops for my customers, it's about cyber resilience versus just cyber security. So I thought, kind of lined up with what you talked about at HOU.SEC.CON, just thought it would be an interesting article to go into. If you had some time to get into it, did you have any thoughts on it, Trey?
Resilience is interesting, right? I mean, when you think of the cybersecurity framework and the iterations of the cybersecurity framework, it talked about an incident response lifecycle, right? Prepare, detect, respond, recover. And there's now some governance aspects that have been added to it. When you think about the big picture of resilience, it's talking about this notion of elasticity, the idea of being able to recover quickly. And so there's a horrible book, but a great concept called Anti-Fragile. Have you read the book, or at least gotten a summary of it? The idea that we're doing business with embracing deficiency, embracing weaknesses, and the things that we run into, like what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, if I can oversimplify, in a corporate environment from a technology standpoint, the idea that we can acknowledge we're not perfect, we're not impossible to impact. The idea of that leaning into and doing business with those deficiencies, I think is a beautiful concept. And so if we were to apply an anti-fragile frame to what resilience is trying to bring us towards, I think it's creating safety, which is the apex calling for cybersecurity leaders, creating safety around vulnerable discussions. We're not perfect. We're shipping code that is not perfect. We're dealing with issues. And so if we can create safety for the acknowledgement that our systems, our code, our infrastructure, our designs, our processes are not perfect, we can do business with that. And I think that's a great frame for a healthy discussion.
Yeah, we often get pulled into with what we do day to day, a lot of the shiny new things and all that kind of stuff. And I think both your presentation, which again we'll get into, but also this article, very much the resilience message, which is where I spend a lot of my time, just because of from an operational technology perspective, those environments that drive the business, it's all about the business. It's
Yeah,
the reason security exists. It's why we do what we do. It's
that's
to
right.
enable resilience, not to, yes, we've got to protect against all these things that we're all focused on. But at the end of the day, if we're not adding value to the business, and that early on, that was a very hot topic because we didn't know how to really approach it. But if you understand how the business works and what you're doing, and that's where you get your risk, all that kind of stuff, and where you're going to protect first and your recovery and all that kind of stuff, what's important, it's good to step back 20 paces and look at everything this way, right? From a resilience perspective, you just got to do that every so often. So the article was good, which aligns very much, like you said, to Trey's article, Michael.
Yeah, it was a little focused. I like the way you're coming at it, Trey. It gives us the permission to be a little bit vulnerable, not vulnerable in the way of, I mean, I guess you can say that we know vulnerabilities are going to be there. What's always fascinated me about the whole cyber resilience discussion, though, is that it is come in relatively late compared to the length of time that infosec and cybersec has been a thing. But when I got trained initially in cybersecurity, the DR plan and disaster recovery, all of that's always been a part of the discussion. So I don't feel like cyber resiliency from a concept of being able to recover is new. What I do think is exactly what you said, Trey. The new concept is not exactly assume breach, but knowing that the stuff is imperfect, knowing that the CISO, like we talked offline before we started recording some of the stuff you and HOU.SEC do together. The podcast I was listening to him about is the CISO, and I thought it was a brilliant way of looking at it. The CISO is one of the weird examples of a job where they can't use their brain to mold their environment. They have to use their brain to adapt to what
That's right.
everybody else thinks your environment should be. Hopefully I did that justice to what he was saying. And the fact that you can go into this saying you don't have to be perfect at your job, you just have to plan for being able to recover for when something happens. Yes, you don't want that thing to happen. You want to put in the controls and get that in place, but to be able to recover from it and be resilient and to not have everybody come down on your head and shoulders beating you when something bad does happen, just knowing that, hey, I can minimize this blast radius and make sure we get back to operational status very quickly. That's really the key to doing it. So
I think there's a natural bias, right? Security folks, the sky is falling. We have a Chicken Little complex where everything's worst case scenario. What if we get breached? What? And so BCP DRP is literally the starting place for this conversation. And I think the business impact analysis is important. So we have a sense of prioritization and value, and we can get into classifying different assets or infrastructures or organizational units. But it's not the big red button where the entire company's offline or we've been fully stalloned, fully compromised, and we have to do a cold restart, ship new laptops, send out new cell phones. Like that does happen. It rarely happens, but there are small deficiencies. I mean, I've never had a car explode or catch fire, but I've definitely had flat tires. I've definitely broken down. Like these are things we have to think about. So when we think about smaller outages, smaller deficiencies, when Route 53 goes offline, like what happens when our hosting provider has an issue? How do we communicate back to our customers? To your point, Michael, if we take 20 steps back, the mission of every company, whether you're selling Levi jeans or making widgets or pumping oil or delivering energy or internet, whatever we do, the mission is to surprise and delight whoever's paying for our goods and services. With that as the North Star, how do we quickly get back to honoring that relationship and driving those outcomes that allows the economy to move? If we adopt that frame, I think the hypothesis follows that our mission is to make it expensive and dangerous to do things that disrupt or manipulate the infrastructure that empowers goods and services to flow. if we adopt the business perspective, well, to your point, we're not building the infrastructure. We're not designing the code or the delivery or the customer experience, but we're looking to help build its ability to, one, withstand and to recover gently in a way that allows surprise and delight for our customers. And so that business centric view, it's no longer Sisyphus. You're no longer carrying the stone up the hill by yourself. The weight of the world is not strictly on your shoulders. And one of the things I talked about in the talk, and I think that most CISOs need reminded, is we're not the solo artist in every section of the orchestra. We're the orchestra conductor cultivating tension and then working to relieve it across the organization. We don't have to argue with engineering if customer support or legal is having the conversation saying, listen, we've got a customer commitment. We have a contractual commitment. We have a commitment to our partners. It's not us arguing for the outcomes that we care about. It's allowing the business to naturally own the outcomes we care about. And so it's more of that conductor relationship working across the business. And I don't think non-deterministic engineering patterns, this political stuff, is stuff that we spend enough time working with in our leadership tier.
Yep. Well, that's a really good rundown of this article. I think we delved into areas that because it was fairly prescriptive on how you went at it, but I think it aligned well. So let's use that as something of a segue. We're going to take a quick break. After we take this break, we're going to think back to what we just talked about, come into Trey's world, talk about what Trey got him into this world, and then just kind of the way of thinking, which might be scary, everybody. I just want to warn you.
I don't know why you do this to people you care for.
And then we'll talk about your talk at HOU.SEC.CON. So let's everybody enjoy the break. We'll be right back. And we are back. So, Mr. Trey Ford, friend of HOU.SEC.CON, really happy to have you on here. Let's talk about you a little bit here for a few minutes. I know. You don't like to talk about you, but we're going to force you anyway. So we ask all of our guests this. We don't do like a movie question or anything like this. We really want to know about you. If you want to talk about your favorite movie as part of a reference for what got you into security, I'm fine with that. But generally, what led you into InfoSec, cyber, what you do, what got you into because I've known you for a long time. I knew you before you were in the CISO world, and then you came into it. So what got you in here and what got you into CISOs and all that good stuff?
Gosh. Well, thank you for having me on. And I hate talking about myself. I feel like I've had an amazing ride and people have given me impossible opportunities and I keep stepping in it and somehow not completely screwing things up. And so, a lot of us came through when there was no computer science answer for cybersecurity. There was just computer science. I don't have a degree in computer science. I'm not a developer. I didn't come from that side. I grew up building computers in the early 90s. So, you're buying white box computer parts. You remember Computer User Magazine, and the last page had all the BBS dial-up things. So your AT command strings and going on to BBSs and kind of the asymmetric gameplay and that kind of nonsense. I got a copy of Doom and Duke Nukem. And so, setting up and playing these and, optimizing and hacking the Windows settings to maximize performance for the games, head-to-head dial-up. And so, dialing and performance monitoring the modem to improve response times. And then some of the other head-to-head games, I started learning about binary editing and started tweaking and basically like giving myself the golden gun, if you will, the BFG 9000 scenario for every one of the weapons I'd be playing head to head with my buddies with. Like, this is unfair, you're cheating. I'm like, well, let me show you how I'm doing this. And so it kind of got terrible, but I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have the code development context to actually understand. I understood what was happening, but I couldn't read the code, pull that apart. It was all hex. But what I found myself doing was helping other people with their computers, helping with networking and that kind of stuff. Found my way into working for an ISP in my hometown. So I'm riding my bicycle around town at 14 years old, playing tech support for an ISP at a key to the bell switch closet, and wound up at a community college, leaving community college because I was making more money consulting, doing IT work than they were claiming I could make after I graduated college, which was a business decision that had other impacts way down the road. Wound up going to work for the Salvation Army doing tech support, still making more money consulting and moonlighting. So I left there. Wound up going to work for HOU.SEC.CON at some point. So I traveled around the world doing pen testing and assessment stuff. I was one of the first QDSPs, which turned into QSAs in the PCI universe. And so, I was this hot-headed young man consultant dude with a big ego that thought he knew some stuff. And the old Unix beards and ponytails were, for the most part, very patient, teaching this young man how the world really works and how best practices didn't exist and technologies that we made these impossible decisions with. Facing these constraints, these are actually pretty clever, and there are better ways now, but these are sunk cost investments that we're still making money on, so they're going to stay put. And I'm humbled and convicted that I need to spend a lot more time coaching and investing in the next generation as they're coming online. They're coming out with degrees, but no experience. But there's a lot more we should be doing there. So it's been an amazing ride. I went from Fishnet to White Hat Security. I think that's where we first connected, is in that chapter. So working with Jer and Robert and that crew. I did some product management at McAfee. It's kind of a natural progression. You go from consulting to sales engineering to product management. There's kind of a business arc there. McAfee was fascinating. The McAfee Secure platform, going in like a super hacker, that hacker safe acquisition, both embarrassing and delightful to get a real taste of how security can empower a company. Moved over to Zynga, running security operations at Zynga. So massive, like I defended your farms on Farmville, Cityville, like nothing to brag about. It was really confusing. A lot of instant response, e-discovery, e-crime, that kind of stuff. Super fun. We IPO'd there. I went from Zynga to Black Hat. And so I have both Black Hat and White Hat W-2s on my historical resume. So I'd spoken at Black Hat with Jeremiah a couple of times, helped with some training. I was a booth babe as a sales engineer, but I never worked on the other side of the desk. And so I had the privilege of serving the community, producing Black Hat globally. And I got to meet a lot of the research community. And public service announcement: if you work with events professionals, folks that produce your booth or spend time producing events, give them a hug. I don't care if it's a small B-Sides, if it's a HOU.SEC.CON, or if it's Black Hat. It's the same amount of work to get food and beverage and a venue and content and programming. And whether you have 1 track, 3 tracks, or 20 tracks, the delta between them is very small. And so all people hear about is what's wrong, what's broken. There's fire drills that you'll never hear about, but they're tired, they're not resting. It's a real whooping. So I would avoid that for the rest of my career, but I have much love and appreciation for the folks that do that. I had the opportunity to go from Black Hat to Rapid7, do a lot of public advocacy, working in Washington and standing up some not-for-profit partners to advocate for security researchers. There's a real difficult legal climate around disclosure and conversations about hacking and research. So between the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and ECPA, and the third-party doctrine, a whole bunch of other things that get into the difficulties and legalities of performing research, we've disempowered the "if you see something, say something" safety ecosystem that exists everywhere else in software. We don't have this defect relationship saying, "Hey, this isn't probably safe." And so through that journey at Black Hat is where I met Casey. I got to partner with Bugcrowd through the years at Rapid7 and onward. Went to Salesforce. I was the CISO at Salesforce for the Heroku platform and public cloud infrastructure. Fascinating. Remote code execution as a service. Terrifying. Like, take a hard look at what you're getting into and realize you're probably not smart enough to fully understand what you just caught. So with humility, you've seen dogs chasing cars down the street. I feel like the guy that multiple times in my career, I've caught the car, I've got my teeth in the bumper, and I'm asking, what have I done? That's kind of what this has been. And so it was a lot of fun dealing with that infrastructure. We built the private spaces platform and a single tenant enterprise compliance capable platform as a service offering. And it was amazing. And the partners were great. And the surface area for that work was phenomenal. I had an amazing team. I joined an amazing product security organization, and laughably, we were both a Bugcrowd customer, and we had, I think, 3 to 5 of their top 10 at the time researchers in some of their programs. So longtime advocate, but from there I went to private equity. So I apologize, I'm wearing a Start shirt. I probably shouldn't be doing that anymore.
Turtlenecks for you from now on.
Fair enough. So private equity was fascinating. I have a really weird vantage point where, so the private equity firm I worked at had about $100 billion in assets under management, which translated to like 80 to 100 companies at any point. And so I'm working daily with CISOs. Uh, so some amazing folks working with unbelievable financial constraints and investment hypotheses. Some of them running very like mature security programs. And then I ruined their day saying, "Oh, I couldn't read you into this, but here are 3 horribly insecure acquisitions we're tucking in. None of the seams are going to talk. None of the EDRs are going to match. Nothing's going to be co-termed. And product's planning on integrating these in 90 days. So I'm sorry. Yeah, have a good day." Um, so over the 2.5 years I was there, I had the privilege of helping recruit and hire 50 CISOs. And so it's a really weird thing when I love talking to CISOs because we all carry the same mantle and face the same problem set. But it's really weird interviewing peer CISOs because you're not going to work for me. But I don't want to measure or compare myself. I'm trying to figure out, and I came to really appreciate that there's different archetypes of CISOs. There's the 0 to 1 player coach builder. There's the team leader for the small hyper growth groups, the folks that love to hire and build, and then the folks that are more enterprise program optimization, real big negotiations, P&L, business minded and BA type folks. And so I got to work with a whole spectrum of folks and got a sense of what the operating leadership was looking for. I came to feel the pain of corporate leadership, the C team saying, "Hey, we're not going to work with an outside recruiting firm. We're going to hire a CISO." I'm like, "You don't even know what a CISO is. Your recruiting team can't spell CISO, and it's pretty clear. Like, this is terrifying." And so working with a lot of folks that landed a CISO job, and I couldn't talk them out of it, and they hated their life because it wasn't the right fit. And so for those of you in the market looking to be CISOs, I would encourage you, take a pause and ask yourself, am I chasing the title, or is this the place that's going to allow me to, one, show off? And I'm not saying that in the braggarly way, but in the notion of I can showcase and maximize my value to the business through my strengths with the right logical ways to grow in this next role. A lot of us want the role. I understand that the title's a big deal. A lot of folks think they want it. But ask yourself, am I going to hurt the company, hurt myself, hurt my family, my relationships, and those I love? Or is this the right logical growth step? And it's a really hard thing when you're feeling the pinch of a job search, but
Good advice for any profession, by the way.
yeah, all the
So
way.
it's
Yeah.
rock solid. Yeah.
So, it's funny when you meet someone, you never know what's happening behind the eyes, between the ears, like where they're at, what's happening in their life. And it's not just their personal life. Our work lives, especially in cyber, we don't get the clean up on aisle 3 pager call and Monday at 9 a.m. We get it at 4 to 9 p.m. on Friday. And you've had a long, hard week. You've been on the road, and gosh, you want to spend time with your family or doing something that's going to put something back into your soul. And now you're dealing with this load. And
or you get it on Wednesday before Thanksgiving holiday.
yes,
Or
it's
whatever.
well, attackers don't do things on accident. Let's just put it this way. Like, they're business
Exactly.
people too. Like, there's a time to market window that they're very smart about. So it's been an amazing ride. I'm constantly humbled at the challenges we work with, and my opportunity at Bugcrowd is, of course, we're creating safety around discussions and finding defects, trying to understand what is exploitable, what is your attack surface, what can be harassed, and can we align incentives with the ecosystem of internet researchers and bring the diversity of perspective and ingenuity of folks from around the globe with different specializations to exercise your code. Like, you're going to invest in CIC, your unit testing, your pen test, all these things, but pen test is once a year. You're shipping code nonstop. Like, there's so much.
I'll say just for disclosure here, Bugcrowd is not sponsoring this episode.
Sorry, yeah, I'm on a bend.
No. I wanted to key off on that because like, we interviewed Jason Haddix on here not too long ago.
Okay.
And Jason and I were old buds at Fortify on Demand over at HP.
Yeah.
But I remember when he moved on there and built Bugcrowd University. And the reason I'm bring that up is because Bugcrowd as a company has always been about, and it aligns to our mission a lot at HOU.SEC.CON, has always been about the community and building that community.
That's right.
And that Bugcrowd University, for people who were trying to get into bug research and bug hunting and that kind of thing, it was just there. I mean, anybody could get to it and use it. So it wasn't like you had to pay money to get training and do all of these things. Now, did that help Bugcrowd? from a perspective of finding more people, absolutely, but it served the greater community. So I've always liked and Casey. I don't know Casey extremely well. Known him, met him a couple of times. He's always seemed like a very genuine guy, and wanting to do stuff. So really appreciate what y'all are doing over there. So I'm going to say segue twice. So to move into your talk and a lot of what you're talking about. And obviously we always include a link down in the show notes for everybody. But the title was the CISO's first principle analysis of incentive alignment. So we say this a lot, but we don't get to see the talks when we're at the show, so we have to watch the recordings. When I first saw the title, I really kind of thought you might start going down the arsenic route of talking about some of the bad things that have been happening in our industry. But I was happy to see that that's not where you're going, because you were talking about non-financial incentives and non-economic incentives. But it kind of brought to mind for me what you were just saying about you need to go into this eyes wide open. I remember when I first got out of security management and went into resales, Mike Rothman said Farnham's going into resale with eyes wide shut, and I was like,
I love him.
Yeah, I love him to death. He's not in our industry anymore, unfortunately. But
he's a candy man. It's good.
Yeah, he's doing cool stuff. But it reminded me of that kind of, you need to go into this knowing what your ideas are, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. And I've got a friend who's a CISO who's about to retire, and he was retired and he came back. Somebody asked him to be a CISO for him to start it, get that going. He had the best mindset ever. He was like, look, I don't have to be here. I'm here to help your organization get secure and to get mature, to get resilient. And it was this whole, like, I have no reputation to build. I've built my reputation. I don't have any incentives. I can retire. I can walk away from this anytime. So he was able to do things and make progress in that organization because he had incentives that weren't all of the incentives that new CISOs or even somebody who's just, been in for a little while have to worry about. And I've had amazing conversations with him on how he's able to just move forward. But a lot of what you're talking about is, in my mind, is just trying to make sure that you've got that figured out. And Sam and I talk about this a lot of time, like Dragos's whole line is, what is it, Sam?
Safeguarding civilization.
Safeguarding civilization. It's like,
yes,
we're in this for real reasons. Mm-hmm. And it's helping that organization, but helping the larger civilization be secure. So I'll shut up and let you talk about what your talk about was from your perspective, and then we'll get into some discussion on it.
Look, I love that frame, and I wish more of us, I'm not there, didn't have a going concern. We carry an emotional load because, yes, what we do is noble. Some of us accidentally stumbled into this, but we're here because it's missional. What we do is something we care deeply about. There's so many things I wish I could be a part of, but I know that my highest ROI impact in making the world a better place is right here doing what we're doing in this field. And it's delightful to know that we have a place and we're on mission and we're able to collaborate and fight a good fight. But if things don't go well, we have to pay the mortgage. I hate to pull the yuppie Nuremberg defense, but we have to pay the mortgage. Everybody has a boss. And so backing into that, when I spoke to incentive alignment, when we talk about how incentives work, I think there's a lot about leadership that we don't spend enough time talking about in cybersecurity. Most of us the vast majority of us come from a fairly technical background of some ilk, whether it's networking or systems or SaaS management or software development and computer science. And so again, those are deterministic, mathematically minded constructs where there are logical ways to solve the problem. Non-deterministic engineering is how I would push you to think about. I hate to call it politics, but politics is the architecture of relational influence. And so understanding what helps someone get something done, what drives them to get through the day or to achieve certain milestones, if we can't unlock that, we're not going to be successful. And so an incentive is generally anything that motivates someone to do something. And so financially speaking, on the economic side, it's the financial motivation that drives them. But there's more to this. It's not just buying people's favor and interest. Um, when we think about that, the extrinsic incentives are going to tie back to, the financial rewards, the tchotchkes, the you get the week off, whatever that's going to be. Whereas an intrinsic is going to speak towards that notion of fulfillment. And so one of the things I wanted to press on was that relational aspect of what Daniel Pink spoke to in Drive. People will generally pursue and execute of their own volition if you can give them autonomy, a sense of mastery, and a sense of purpose. And so when we're thinking about this, like, yes, you're reporting to the CTO, like 70 to 80% of CISOs report in through the CTO, the CIO, or a technical executive path. Part of it is we still speak Radio Shack and aren't speaking business. So we don't have a seat at the big kids table. We're going to park that. But the incentive alignment for our outcomes and the things we're driving is OKRs or KPIs are reporting in through some place where we're providing tension. Think about it like, okay, listen, we need to do this. Okay, well, that's going to slow down release velocity, which could throw off delivery, which could throw off product, which is going to throw off time to market. And again, to your 20 paces back standpoint, how are we surprising and delighting and accelerating the flow of goods and services and empowering the economy? We're doing the same thing the attacker is doing. We're just doing it slowly. And to your friend's point, you don't have to be here. None of us do. And the body will reject an organ. Organ transplants will fail because the body rejects the organ. And so I'm not saying you have to be the most likable person in the room, but you need to be honest, you need to be transparent. And if it's not just you driving this, and this is where we go back to leaning on a risk committee, cultivating the safe ecosystem where the business is making decisions, not you, not your boss. Michael, if you're going to play the role of my CTO and I'm coming to you for this next year's budget, and you tell me, Trey, that's not in the budget, you just made a massive risk acceptance. And that's the end of the conversation if I don't have a risk committee. But if we turn around and have the conversation saying, listen, this is what we'd agreed upon. Here's the direction where we're going. The line got moved and here's the cut line. This is what's below the line. This is unfunded. Yeah. The business now needs to risk accept this. We're going to have a series of conversations. The risk committee is going to make a determination. Well, two things have just unlocked that create safety for you, Michael, as my CTO. One, you no longer have any idea, like you're not worried about what crazy Trey is going to say in front of the ELT or the board or the audit and risk committee. I'm simply reading the weather report. Like the facts of the matter are these, like, this is what we all agreed upon. We have some uncomfortable risk. We've really struggled through this. This is what we prioritized. Here's the untreated risks. And we're bringing that back to the board. The board's the only place in the organization that can say, I'm going to forgive a financial target. Two of the other companies I oversee have dealt with this. We're not dealing with that here. What's it going to take? And you better have an answer for it. And so it's no longer just you. You're again, if you adopt that vantage point of the orchestra conductor, which I think is the superpower of what you're speaking to from your friend's perspective, the emotional investment and sense of panic if I fail has been divorced of that. If we're here for when things happen, and things do happen. Back to your conversation around anti-fragile and resilience, kind of that concept loop that we started with at the start of this conversation. We're here to be the adult that quarterbacks or orchestra conducts. Here's the response when the tension's presented. Sometimes it's written in the music and it's planned. A lot of times in our industry, it's not. And so we're going to guide through that, be the steady hand on the till, guide the process.
In a world of, I mean, these are all great points, but in a world of the reality, right, of being in many cases a very reactionary business, right, of, responding to things, how do you keep that front and center? Like, how do you keep that consistently in front of yourself, your team, you're up the chain of command, that kind of thing? So you don't the whole concept of your KPIs and the bigger picture of what you're working on. Because if you're getting that call at 4 p.m. on Friday and you're totally exhausted and fatigued from having to work all weekend on a response, you got to come back in on Monday and keep back at it.
Yeah. So many different ways to answer this question. First and foremost, in a happy universe, our risk register is rational. And so the risk committee understands, here's the worst case scenarios that would involve a BCP DRP big red button event. And then there's another grouping in the risk register that is our most frequently or most likely encountered scenarios. And so hopefully we've made most of those failure modes impossible. On top of that, in that risk register of the things that we're most concerned about, we have our untreated risks. And we've agreed upon what those are. We're reporting those as key risk back to the ELT in QBRs in the audit risk committee. If we face an issue, hopefully it's radiating from our most frequently encountered risk list that we know, and we had a process failure or something else, or it's one of the, like, we could not fund for that. We could not address that risk. And so we're carrying that risk. We receive that risk. Never waste an issue, but pointedly, it's our job to, I have a 4-year-old son. I love him like I can't start to explain. There is a handful of things we're wrestling on, and I don't have a question. I'm going to walk in the door, and one of these things is going to be a situation. My job is to be the adult and to move towards him with love and empathy and provide coaching and guidance around here's what happens. And I don't want this to be a condescending paternal relationship where the CISO is talking down to the business, because we all know that's irrational. But pointedly, in the face of dealing with all these different failure modes or defect impact categories that we deal with in cyber, these are things where that's why the RR playbook has to exist. So your incident response plan informs all these things. So I think to most directly answer your question, one, a well-prepared CISO has a really good risk register. It has a well-informed risk committee. It has well-structured incident response plans. And our job is to, okay, we know how to do this. This is how we respond in these ways. You're going to be physically tired. Your meaty human robot thing that carries your brain around is going to be exhausted. You're going to feel some kind of way. There's a whole other rant about talking about physical wellness, fitness, rest, all those things.
Okay.
But pointedly, like, you've got to take care of the meat wagon if your brain's going to work. Like, we clearly don't prioritize sleep or diet enough in this space. But I will tell you, the majority of accidents in aviation start with deficient rest for the pilot. Like, that's the anchor we all start with. So there's a couple different directions. Is there anywhere specific you wanted to go to, or did I answer your question?
No, I think I'll only say, to complete your thought about your 4-year-old kid, CISOs don't leave Legos out in the middle of the floor that you step on in your bare feet when you're going to the bathroom at night. So, yeah.
Well played. Well played.
Yeah, users are the toddlers here, but we, are just the business can be. Yeah, I'm with you. Not speaking negatively, that's a whole nother conversation. I'm not one of the users are all stupid people either. We've had that conversation here before.
One of the first things my kids could tell you when you ask, what do we control? And like my daughter had very few words. My son had very few words when they could echo this back. What do we control? And the answer was our attitudes. And so ultimately, when things are going completely off the rails, I have to stop and ask myself with my dad voice, what do I control? And I have to set the tone. In an incident response, that's the most important thing, is establishing our tone and creating safety for people to be tired. If it's going to be a big incident, the first thing you're doing is sending people off to rest and getting a rotation started so we can keep fresh minds in protecting the health and safety of folks. I've put people in the hospital because I didn't effectively prevent them from going into hero mode. These are people that I know personally, that and care for and love. And I failed them by not saying, log off or I'm locking your machine, go rest. And in retrospect, like, that may be necessary if someone's in hero mode.
Yeah.
We talked a lot
Hero
about
mode can be extremely detrimental. Absolutely. I did a thing early on at Accuvant where we talked about the firefighter hero mode. You got to get away from that. You can't have a single person trying to fix all the things, because it's definitely not good for them physically, mentally, anything. So
no, you could permanently break people.
Absolutely.
When you go fast, you go alone. When you go big, go together. And it's your job as the security leadership to make those calls and push people to rest and do what you have to do to protect them from themselves. We have to go big. We have to go together.
Yeah. Trey, great conversation. Fantastic, man. I really appreciate you being on here. This whole conversation needs to be had more and more and more. The incentive conversation, the giving yourself grace conversation, giving others grace conversation needs to be had. So I really appreciate your mindset on that and your advice for people. I hope this becomes more of a regular talk for you. And maybe we can get you out at HOU.SEC.CON to talk about this in April.
I'd be honored. Let's do it. Let's go.
All right. Well, we'll line that up, man. Well, thank you, Trey. Any parting thoughts?
I would challenge people to think hard about incentives. When you talk to other executives, when you go to talk to the board, be prepared, be able to answer those 3 questions. What do I need to know? Why do I care? What do you need from me? And what we're speaking to is, I understand what your primary motives are. It gives you that opportunity for business alignment, but it allows transparency in your motives and your reasoning. There's so much we can do to be more empathetic and more thoughtful, and it creates a lot more space for that human experience. Let's dignify the human behind that conversation.
Absolutely. Great parting thoughts. Appreciate it, sir. Thanks for being on, man.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Sam?
Nope. Same. I'm in the same boat. I think it's important to take these steps back, right? And understand why we're doing what we're doing, and making
Absolutely.
sure we're, to Trey's point, taking care of ourselves. I've seen way too many people deteriorate as a result, or get out of security altogether because they just get burned out. And so a lot of these things align with that. It's a really good discussion.
Perfect. Yeah, I loved the part where you got to be prepared. You got to know, and being prepared, when you talked about it in your talk, being prepared and walking in the room and knowing those answers to those 3 questions, just that in and of itself can help you mentally know that you're prepared and be confident in that and not be as stressed out. So that's a lot of what I got from your talk as well. So, all right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us.